Hi, I'm Dr. Keith Graham from the School of Teacher Education at National Taiwan Normal University. Welcome to my office hours. So today you said you want to talk about translanguaging and language scaffolding.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
So I think many students, including me, find that these two concepts is difficult to distinguish. So from your perspective, what is the essential difference between these two concepts?
Okay. So for those of you that have not taken my class, but you are watching this video, my students get exposed to this tool called the BTOPTS. The BTOPS essentially has 7 indicators in its current version, though it is still a tool I'm developing to make it work for bilingual education. Nonetheless, 2 of the indicators are translanguaging and language scaffolding. So, for your question, the difference between the two is this. With translanguaging, we're talking about using 2 languages. Sometimes it's for instructional purposes, and sometimes it is for supportive purposes. But that indicator is looking at how we use the 2 languages in the bilingual classroom. Because in a bilingual classroom, we want a bilingual teacher to sometimes use both languages for instructional purposes, and sometimes when we're using English as the lead instructional language at that segment of the course, we may use some supportive translanguaging to support that. But that's different than language scaffolding, because language scaffolding is only focused on English. So what are we doing to support students in an English-only segment of the lesson? So things like substitution tables. If we want students to produce output, the substitution table is going to be in English and for them to produce English. That is a form of language scaffolding. Language scaffolding will not involve another language. It's just about strategies to help support a single target language. In the case of Taiwan, that would be English.
Okay. So I think many people got confused about it is because like translanguaging, we use Mandarin and also English. However, in language scaffolding, we only use English. However, these two concepts has the similarity of English. So how can a student distinguish between the part of the teacher use English? Because we need to use the BTOP structure to analysis the teacher's instruction.
The purpose of the BTOPS is to basically give a list of things you should see in a bilingual class. So at times during the class, you should see translanguaging. And so you need to make sure that if you're using the BTOPS as your own personal tool, then what the BTOPS tells you is that when I'm creating my lesson and when I'm executing my lesson, I need to make sure that there are times where I'm using Chinese and English for instructional purposes, and there are times where I might use English with Chinese for supportive purposes. But there are also going to be parts of your lesson where you're going to use Chinese only. And there are also going to be part of your lessons where you might use English only. And so you don't have to do translanguaging throughout the entire lesson, but you've got to know that to do a bilingual lesson, there has to be translanguaging throughout. So language scaffolding is for the times where you're using English only for that segment. Now, you've asked about 2 of the indicators. You've asked about translanguaging and you've asked about language scaffolding, but we could also bring in another indicator, multimodality, into this conversation. Because you could also say, well, then what's the difference between multimodality and language scaffolding? And again, there could be some overlap there too. So if you use pictures to try to send a message or to facilitate the sending of a message, that's going to be multimodality. Language scaffolding is going to be strictly about using devices outside of multimodality, outside of translanguaging, because those are separate indicators, using other strategies during parts of the lesson where English is used. So to create that distinction, I think it's very important to have a strong understanding of translanguaging, a strong understanding of multimodality. And if it falls into those 2 categories, then it falls outside of the scope of language scaffolding. Language scaffolding is the other stuff. And so again, substitution tables, sentence stems, those type of things, anchor charts where it talks about how to organize, a paragraph or, a group of language discourse. Those are all language scaffolding strategies because they don't fall into the multimodality bin and they don't fall into the translanguaging bin. So they are all related because they're all strategies for supporting learning in the bilingual classroom. But basically, the language scaffolding dimension, its purpose is to account for the other things to support learning through the target language.
So now I think we have some basic knowledge about what is language scaffolding and also the translanguaging. So the last question may be about how the pre-service teacher or also the in-service teacher can implement these two strategies into their classes.
Implement translanguaging and implement language scaffolding?
Yeah.
Well, I think you can use the BTOPTS more than two ways. You can use the BTOPTS to guide the planning of a lesson. So as you're planning your lesson, you can think about, okay, where in the lesson am I going to be implementing translanguaging, either instructional translanguaging or supportive translanguaging? How am I going to use multimodality during this lesson? And then where can I put language scaffolding, particularly when students need to produce output? Because I think in many ways, producing output is where language scaffolding, I think, is often used. So you can use it as you plan your lesson to make strategic decisions. But then the other thing is, if you video record your lesson, you can use it to analyze, okay, did I do it? Did I do it? Did I do it? Did I do these things? The purpose of the BTOPS is to just raise your awareness about the different strategies that a bilingual teacher would use to make sure that students are learning. And so it's basically, I don't want to call it a checklist because it's not a checklist, but think of it like a roadmap. It's a roadmap for the additional skills that are required in a bilingual lesson. Skills that are outside the scope of what you might use in other lessons, monolingual lessons.
Do you think that all of the indicators in the BTOPS should be used in a lesson?
I think in a quality bilingual education lesson, yes, you're probably going to see all of them. But you'll also notice that under mastery, for each indicator, it says as appropriate for the lesson. So there is room for contextual differences. Depending on how you practice bilingual education, because there's different ways you could practice it, the BTOPS might change a little bit. And the emphasis on an indicator or the execution of an indicator might change. But I don't think there's going to be many instances where an indicator would not be there. And you might think, okay, well, maybe in language scaffolding, it's not there. But one of the important things about the language scaffolding indicator, too, is the aspect of differentiation. Because if students have different language abilities, that is the indicator where the teacher is actually acknowledging those different abilities and, leveraging them.
I think wrap up our conversation today. Can you just give the bilingual pre-service teacher or an in-service teacher like a short sentence talking about what is translanguaging and what is language scaffolding?
Translanguaging is the use of two languages for instructional and learning purposes. If you are making decisions about using two or more languages, that is translanguaging. If you are making decisions about differentiation for different English proficiency levels or providing support in English for English, that is language scaffolding.
Good answers.
Thank you. We'll end it there. Thank you for attending my office hours. If you have a question about this video or other aspects of education in Taiwan, send me an email at kmgraham@ntnu.edu.tw. I'll see you next time.